Hey, if you're loving Creative Mind, check out some of our past episodes where we dive deep into topics like children's book illustration, video game design, filmmaking, and of course, the most important topic of all, how do you make a living as an artist? So please hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you never miss an episode. And check out the show notes for links to our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube page for even more great content.
The initial draw was probably, no pun intended, I guess, was distraction. I think, just trying to distract myself from some of the harder depression that I went through growing up and later on after I got out of high school and stuff. And that was my escape.
That's artist Rodney Thompson. On this episode of Creative Mind, we dive a little bit deeper into our state of mind, how art really can be a great piece of therapy. And Rodney talks about his ups and downs and his feelings behind the work he's doing now and the work he's going to do in the future. And so this is a really good episode for people who are just thinking about, in the time we're living in right now, how to translate their emotions through their fingertips. So sit back, take some notes, and enjoy as we talk with artist Rodney Thompson. So Rodney, you were featured in the Academy Spring Show, which for the Academy is a really big deal. Talk to us about what it was like for you to come to the Academy and now start your MFA, which is an even bigger deal, as somebody who's a painter. What was the reason you wanted to come to the Academy?
When I was in my early 20s, I'd taken some time off of high school and was just working, and I was like, I don't know where I'm going to go or what I'm going to do, but I want to do art. And so I just kind of looked all over the country for different places. And I'm from Texas, so any way I could get out of Texas was my goal, and try to just explore a little bit and kind of get out of my comfort zone. And I looked to the Chicago Art Institute, and I looked at the Academy, and San Francisco was really interesting to me. So I decided I would give that a shot. And the Academy, all of the stuff that I researched about the Academy just kind of aligned with me pretty well. And I was pretty interested in their programs. I originally looked at their illustration program because I was really interested in doing maybe comic book work. At the last minute, changed over and decided, well, I'm going to go in for fine art. I really like their program, and I know some of the instructors that work there just from people who I'd followed. So I dove in with the Academy.
Who were some of those instructors that you were already following that you were attracted to?
Let me see. There was a guy, oh God, what's his name? Jason Bowen. He was one, and I actually had a class with him. He was somebody that I just kind of found on Southwest Art Magazine, I think. He was listed in there at one point, and I'd kind of gotten attached to him and followed his work, and I really liked. That's when I started getting it a little bit more into fine art side and less more like the fantastic comic book side, and really noticing the techniques that went into that and how challenging that was, but how beautiful the work could be. And he's somebody that caught my attention, and I realized he had taught there, and I thought, oh, that'd be cool to go there and see, some of his work or maybe meet him. Then I had an intro to painting figure with him years ago, and it went really well. I really enjoyed working with him.
Oh, that's awesome. That's got to be a great way to, I like your work. Now you're in person guiding my hand. Well, yeah, now that we got the Academy stuff out of the way, let's get deeper into the artistic side of you. So you said you were growing up in Texas. You wanted to get out of Texas. Nothing against Texas, but I can totally understand that. For you, this concept of being an artist, what did that mean to you then? And maybe what does that mean to you now?
Then, I don't know if I had quite figured out what that exactly meant to me as far as just following my intuition with it. I just really knew that was something that I felt like I needed to do, and I had a really strong interest in it, and I've been doing it for as long as I can remember. I've always had a pencil in my hand drawing and stuff.
What was some of that early stuff you were drawing? Was it just kind of doodles, or were you really...
Yeah, it was like a lot of doodles. I would make up my own comic book characters, and I would recreate comic book covers that I really liked, and I did a lot of Spider-Man stuff and X-Men stuff, and so, yeah, that's kind of what I really got into, and I stayed with that for years, and as I got older, I got into high school, and I got into sports, and it kind of dwindled off a little bit with the comic books, but I still did a lot of creative stuff, and a little painting, a little drawing.
Yeah, that's always a weird time when once you get into high school and puberty kicks in and lots of changes and now I'm playing sports and that takes a lot of my time and
Yeah, the
you know,
hormones like run your life, and
right.
it's,
I want to play football, but I don't want to play football. I just want to draw. But you need to go play football now. So as you're graduating high school, was that the goal was to go straight into an art school, or you're, like a lot of people, you're coming into the academy not fresh out of high school. You're coming into art school a little bit older, like many of us, myself included. Right out of high school, what were you looking to do?
I honestly just assumed that I would do what everybody else was doing and go find a college and go there. And, think I'd figure it out as I went. And that was what all my friends were doing. A lot of people that went to school, they knew their school, they had it pretty figured out. And I was like, I guess I'll do that. And then I took a little bit of community college and I was like, this is not right, not feeling good. So I just decided I'm going to take some time off and just work a little bit and kind of figure out what I need to do and what's right for me. And that ended up being like 3 years out of high school. And then I finally ended up going back and I was like, okay, I think I feel it now. And I think I know where I want to go.
And where was that? What was the path you started to walk down?
Well, it was starting to hunt for a school to go to. And I really realized that, like being in Texas, I was like, I'm kind of in the same thing. I just feel like I'm stuck in a rut here. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I need to work out with myself. I don't feel like I'm able to do that in this little bubble that I'm in. So I really wanted to explore. I think about a year before I went to the academy, I started really looking around and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So
was there something that attracted you to the world of art, or was it the drawing? Was it the lifestyle? What was that you were looking for that really made you connect with wanting to be an artist?
The initial draw was probably, no pun intended, I guess, was distraction. I think, just, trying to distract myself from some of the harder depression that I went through growing up and later on after I got out of high school and stuff. And like that was my escape. I loved creating things out of my imagination or seeing what other people could create out of their imagination, which drew me to the comic books. And so that kind of latched me in. And then once I got in, I really loved technique and trying to figure out, well, how do they create that stuff? Like, how do they know how to make an arm as long as it's supposed to be, or, draw muscles on a superhero or, anything like that. And so I really, that kind of built a bridge into like refining the skill a little more.
It's interesting you brought that up because, we're going to kind of set that up and talk about it a little bit later about art as therapy and art as kind of a healing process. Because, if you go to your Instagram page, right up front, you're talking about dealing with depression and suicide prevention. And your thesis project is, as we're going to get into, is really dealing with mental health, which is so super important. And I think so many people forget that art is and can be one of the greatest pieces of therapy going. And in comic books, in a very unique way, there is a lot of angst and emotion and dealing with change that comes about in comic books. What were some of those comic books that you were attracted to that really connected with you?
Probably the ones that I like, Spider-Man and X-Men were ones that I really latched onto. Sorry if you can hear our dog in the background too, but
That's okay.
She's not happy about not being in the room right now. Yeah, so Spider-Man and X-Men were the ones that I was really drawn to. Spider-Man a lot just because he was a kid and going through a lot of different changes, and I was like, oh, that's so cool, and he's really young and has all of this stuff that he's dealing with, and he's still finding a way to make it work, get through it, and come out on the other end. And X-Men was just like, they're so different and they get looked at badly because of that difference. And I loved that. I remember learning that at an early age, kind of where Stan Lee was going with that stuff, and was just blown away by it. And I just thought it was really incredible. So I think that those kind of helped build more of an empathetic response in me. And also, I had my own personal connection to it, and it resonated really well with, not feeling like I fit in a lot of ways. And then, having harder stuff to go through and finding a way to get through it. And I just loved that. So
if you want to let the dog in, If she's not going to jump up and down on the microphone, that's perfectly fine with me, man.
Yeah, well, she's locked in her kennel right now, so she's.
Okay.
But is it too much? Is it right now?
No, I don't.
Okay.
It's there, but if it's easier to let her in, fine, yeah, I don't care.
I think she'll calm down here in another minute. She's very disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, if she's not barking on Mike, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. I want to get more, you talking about artist therapy and stuff. So now that you're doing your thesis project and you have this comic book connection, or at least that art can bring out the empathy you were talking about, how important do you think art is in helping people deal with problems they're having, either big or small?
I think it's incredibly powerful doing that, whether it's in a very direct way, like what I'm doing, where I'm just saying these people's their head is on fire because they're having a mental health crisis or struggle. Or, I mean, if it's just the process of creating it, like in art therapy, or if it's not art therapy, it's a little kid drawing comic books, it's, I think, profoundly helpful. And there's just so many ways that it can be helpful. It could be the connection that you have with an art instructor that helps you learn a little bit more and, maybe find a little bit of a stronger purpose that pulls you away from any of the hard stuff you're dealing with. There's a lot to it that's wonderful. And I think each person's different in how they respond to it or what they need from it. And that's one thing I love about it is the variety of ways that it can be helpful.
What are some of those ways that it's really helped you?
Well, starting when I was young was obviously the comic books, and that was kind of my detachment and able to go into this fantastic other world that I could be in and just really enjoy what these characters were and the strife that they dealt with and how they came out through it. And then loving to work with my hands, I came through in a way of building a skill set. So I just obsessively painted and drew all the time. That in itself was a way for me to kind of work through. It's like exercising. You want to run off some anxiety, you go for a jog. And for me, that works. But also, drawing for 10 hours straight will burn off a lot. Yeah. So, I mean, even like an hour would do a lot for me. And I mean, it can be stressful too if it's not getting where I want it to be, but it's still in the end is a win if I'm doing it. And now being more direct with like the fire paintings that I'm creating and saying, well, this is something that is personal for me. This is what my experience has been. And I'm being kind of vague with it on what my experience is through the paintings, but I do that too in a way for it to be just mine and also for anybody that sees it and has their own response to it and say, wow, that resonates with me in this way, which I really hope in some way that it can be helpful.
Well, let's jump into your thesis then, because when people are looking at your work, specifically this, does it have a title or do we just want to call it the Fire Series?
We just call it the Fire Series.
Fire Series, okay. I know it's still early in the process before we get the really cool name. At first glance, it's someone with their head on fire. And they're very visually striking. They're really beautiful. There is a lot of great technique in there. And you're painting all in oil or is it acrylic?
All in oil.
All in oil, okay. And it's a heavy hand too, which is really, really impressive. Walk us through how this thesis project started and where it's evolving to.
It was probably like maybe 4 or 5 semesters ago, and I had a class with Kevin Moore. It was the surrealism stylization expression class, and that really, I think, was a turning point for me to kind of open up a little bit more. Prior to that, I was so like do what the instructor said, build my skill, work, and, not branch out from there and just try to get good grades and build good skill. And then I got to Kevin's class and he just allowed us to open up a little bit more and introduced us to a lot of work that could still have a foot in realism, but also went off into expressionism and all of these different things, surrealism. And it just allowed us to think out of the side of the box. And I just loved it. And I was like, yeah, this is what I originally went to school for. I wanted to do that kind of stuff. I kind of lost it along the way of like, I just need to be technically fantastic. And I still have that. I'm still working to do as best as I can.
Well, no, a lot of your work, I mean, if you look at your portfolio, your portraiture is tremendous. It's got a very unique style. It's got, the eyes and the lighting choices are very heavy and very upfront. But the surrealism aspect is always a dangerous path for a lot of people, either in school and afterwards, because it can go sideways
Yes,
very quickly.
totally. Yeah, I think I hesitated getting into it a lot too. And even after that first class with Kevin, I didn't go. I did my first fire painting then, and then I didn't start them again until this last semester. I had full intention of actually doing it, and I just was like, well, I really want to make sure I do it well. And so, you kind of talk yourself out of it or overthink it. I kind of went back into the grind and started, just working on that technical skill. But then once I got into this last semester, he let us cut loose, and I really was like, okay, I'm just going to go for it and just see what happens.
Was there a push you needed, or what was that hurdle to get you to kind of go, all right, I can really do it now? Was it a personal thing or a technical thing?
It was a little both, mostly a personal thing. I think I was feeling a little burnout on the, like, trying to be a perfect student. And I mean, I loved what I've created over my academic career, but it just felt like it was getting monotonous. And this actually felt like I was reaching deeper within myself to paint something and using all that technical skill that I learned, which I am grateful for. And Kevin also was like, you know what? I want you to just tell me how many paintings you're going to do. Give me an idea of what you're going to do and go for it. And I think that was what I needed to hear. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go for it. So, and I just did. And I let myself just let go and dive into it and really listen to my heart on it. And it kind of helped.
So where did you start? Where was the thinking, the creative spark, as it were? I mean, we're going to try and lower the amount of puns we use because we're talking about fire, that burning desire, the spark of creativity, the match I struck to do something or something or other. Where did you begin with this? What was your mindset on, I'm going to paint this subject dealing with mental health, which again is another giant subject, which can be very personal, but it's hard to get that connection to. Where did you want to begin with this?
Oh, that's I don't know that I had a complete idea on where I wanted to begin with this. I think it was just little bits of stuff that were coming in here and there. My wife got sick with COVID, and she's still dealing with it. She's got long COVID, and it's now 15 months in. She's not the same person she was. She's completely changed as a human being, and so she's had a lot of struggle, and I've had a lot of struggle through that, and it's been hard because we were fighting with where we're going to get our make money and all of this. Like, we lost our jobs for a while, and I became her caretaker, and it's just been a really tough situation. So I think that helped inspire, because I was just watching her like shut down so much through this. It was just taking so much out of her and completely exhausting her, and I think it was a mirror for me to kind of see, like, okay, this is really hard, and I can kind of see it on myself too, getting really hard, and every day was different, and it was just, we had good weeks, we had bad weeks with it, and still, like, she just recently came out of a flare that was really bad and put her in bed for a week, and so it's been a challenge, and I think that through this last 15 months, I was like, I gotta change what I'm doing a little bit. It really helped me kind of realize the importance of what we choose in life, and I think I needed to be able to paint from my heart or draw from my heart, and not just draw what I was supposed to or be a photocopy machine, or just really just listen to what I felt like I needed to say.
Talk about some of the images that you've done. Let's talk about that main image. If you go to the Spring Show site, it has the image of the couple in the foreground on the street, and then a person walking away engulfed in flames. What was the thinking for that and the story behind it for you?
First, getting started with the whole series, it was more of like I wanted to really somehow show mental health and like what my experience was with it. So I started practicing with Heads on Fire and doing little studies, and then I was getting deeper into it and thinking, well, how does the world see it? How do we interact with it? How do we choose not to interact with it, or naively not interact with it? And the couple in the foreground is just they're just people, they're kind of going about their day while a person walks by them completely engulfed in flame and completely unaware that there's something traumatic happening there. And you can see in her stride that she's not, missing a beat, but she's on fire. It's just kind of a reflection on how it can get missed in our society, and how I felt with it with my own experience, how I felt like I've gone under the radar, or also how I've kept it under the radar too at the same time. So
it's interesting you say, we've kept it, you personally put a cover over it or a barricade, because there is so much of art that, is so striking. We look at it and we go, oh, what's this guy thinking? Or the silly, cynical, oh, this guy's going nuts, look at this picture. But at the same time, anybody that sat down and done this, and when you hit that creative vein, you're like, oh, wow, my thinking and my feelings are actually pouring out. And that's a very tough place to get to. How difficult was it for you to get to that point where you were able to just freely create in a cathartic way and be able to create what you wanted to create?
I think it really was very difficult because I let my brain lead before my heart with all of it, and thinking I had to do what the instructors told me, or I have to do this to do a commission and listen to what the patron wants and try to please them and make them happy. That was a lot of it, was people pleasing, making everybody else happy and finding an imbalance there.
And how did that change for the thesis? How easy has it been, or how difficult has it been on this thesis project you're doing?
Once I got into it, it's been easy to let myself do it. I think convincing myself to get to it was a challenge. But once I was like, oh yeah, okay, this feels good. I'm lost in like painting these flames, and they're just like really thick impasto strokes. So I'm globbing up paint and just piling it on. And I don't realize what I've done the last few times. I'm thinking about it, but I'm also totally lost in just the process of putting that on slowly. And I haven't felt that in a while with creating, and it's been wonderful and cathartic. Like, it feels good to do it.
So the odd question, if you're spending so much time on these, does it get lonely when you're doing this work, or is it becoming something you're going to do more of?
I'm going to definitely do more of it. It's not lonely at all. They're right there at the top for me. So as far as like what I'm feeling and wanting to create, so I'm fully engaged with them, and I'm lost in the work when I do it. So yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm in a pretty good space with it right now.
So, you said you're lost in it. So do you now go, okay, I'm a working artist now? Is that how you finally feel?
Yeah, it kind of does feel like that.
That's a great spot to be in, because that's that hard part. And when you're in art school, it's like, am I an artist? Question mark?
Yes. I did it too, but I had a little brief break in between going to the academy, or not a brief, actually a pretty good break. I started just doing commissions as much as I could and making money on the side. So I started a professional track, and then again, at that point, before coming back, I was getting burnt out on what I was doing, and like, this feels like I'm on the right path, but it's not, exactly where I want to be, but I'm heading in the right direction. I just got to refine what direction I'm going in.
So actually, let's talk a little bit about that, where you're wanting to be a professional, because that's kind of a different choice one makes as an artist, because there's I want to create for creativity's sake, and then I want to create because I have a paycheck. I want to create the extra part of I want to create because I want a really, really big paycheck. For you, as deciding to be a working artist, what were you thinking, and what were some of those things you did to be, okay, I'm going to be a working artist now?
When I originally started, I thought, well, I'll be like a high school art teacher. I loved my high school art teacher. She was great, and it was just a really fun class to be in. And I thought that'll be a good idea. I'll do that. And, do some freelance work on the side. And then as I got into it, I got into this really romantic idea of the rock star artist, and I'm going to do that. I'm just going to paint and sell work in galleries all day long and party and all of this stuff. And I realized as I got a little older, I was like, no, that's not totally what I want. That's like every 5% of artists might get that.
Did you find that was really you when it was coming? Like, did you actually have that desire or the ability to be the rock star artist? Was that in your heart?
No, not at all. I had this like built up fantasy, and once I got into like really creating, I was like, that's not it. No, that's not gonna work. I started teaching a little bit though when I was when I initially started again at the academy, and I found I really loved it. And it was more for, I just needed extra money, and I thought, well, I can teach people how to draw simple still lifes, or paint flowers or whatever, or some portraits. I was like, holy cow, I really like this. It's fun to interact with the students. It really brought me back to the basics of what I originally learned, and keeping that foundation strong with me. And I just enjoy showing other people how to do it, and kind of sharing my work and helping them create their own. And that started me thinking, I'm like, well, maybe I would want to teach at a higher level and teach at a university level. And I started throwing around the idea with the MFA, and I watched my wife go through it, and hers was not the most fun degree, and she did awesome in it, but yeah, but at the same time I was like, well, do I really want to do that? And
Yeah, right.
I'm molding over for a few years, and then
the requirements of an MFA are like, I got to do what?
Yes, yeah.
You really? I got to do all that? How does that
Yeah.
seem interesting or fun or enjoyable or why?
Yeah, totally. Once I got closer to the end here, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I really do want to make a good career out of my art and doing freelance stuff, and what feels great for me, but I really love teaching, so I'd like to do that too as well.
That's interesting you brought that up, because that's something that I know Craig Nelson had talked about, and it's one of those things I think so many of us artists forget. It's like teaching is a great path, and actually a pretty important path if you're going to be a working artist. Where else do you get to actually talk about your art and show off or explain without having somebody who's required to be there to actually watch you do it?
Yeah, it's really incredible. There's so many different instructors that I've had that I have completely different methods of going about it, and I've learned so much from them as far as like how they teach, and I've tried to like pick like little pieces here and there of like what they do and how best to interact. One of the biggest things is like the kindness that I've gotten from them and encouragement, and which I am so grateful for. I mean, I've had art instructors before, like way in the past, that are just, they're not really paying attention to what they're doing, but they'll come over and say, you're not doing that right, And most of the instructors that I've had at the academy would just be so kind and like really encouraging, and it's been a good experience with that. So.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah, that is a rare treat to have somebody actually help you correctly. I remember when I was in art school, it was like I had one instructor that was the same way. I was like, no.
Yeah.
Like,
it's
can I get a yes?
Here? Yeah.
But then then you have a couple of the other instructors. Okay, let me sit down. And then for the next 3 hours, they're painting, you're painting. You're like, I want you to stop, but this is fun.
Yeah.
It's great watching you do this. So now that you've got your thesis, which is a big major stepping point in any artist's career, even if it's their first show or an actual thesis project, from the past, and then we'll talk about, going forward. But from the past, what were some of those painterly influences after comic books when you're making that transition from illustrative to fine art, which in a lot of people's minds is this massive, mega shift? For you, where did your influences come from? How did they change, or who were they?
Okay, I think the bridge that got me from comic books to fine art was Salvador Dali. I really got interested in him in high school and into college. I was really fascinated by his work, and I just loved it. I've never done anything remotely like that, but I just was so fascinated by what he created and how he created it and the evolution of his work over his lifetime. That kind of brought me into the fine art world. And then once I got there, I think I really started looking at like Caravaggio was one of my favorites. His use of chiaroscuro I just love that. And I still do that in a lot of my stuff, where I do a really hard, like single light source, really dramatic, dark light. And I just find that so striking. I've not been able to break away from that as many times as I've tried.
Well, if you're going to emulate a couple of artists, I think you're on the right path. Those are good ones.
Yeah. And then on from there, I think more contemporary artists like Richard Schmid and Daniel Green, and those were masters that I just absolutely loved, and really adored Richard Schmid's work and all of his proteges from there on, like Jeremy Lipking and Casey Bond. They are incredible artists, and I still follow their work quite a bit. I love what they do. I think for a long time, which is what led to that burnout, was like me trying to be like that, create what they created, and realizing that I had my own path, and that's just not with the path I'm going to go down. I think I have such a root in that fantastic imagery with comic books that I thought, well, I'm just going to do kind of what I grew up with a little bit, but still keep it in the fine art realm. So, yeah.
What are some of the techniques that you've really been developing and that you enjoy using? Because you talked about that heavy impasto, just that gloppy almost. I'm assuming you're painting with a palette knife as opposed to a brush.
Oh no, I keep it on a brush. I just
really?
Yeah, because I love that scratch of the brush, the hair of the brush. So it feels like it kind of helps me directionally push the flame a little bit more and kind of guide your eye around it. But yeah, so I work mostly in alla prima. I will paint as much as I can all at once. If I don't, I always feel a little bit frustrated if I can't nail it down in one shot. And these are for smaller paintings. For bigger ones, I'll take, weeks or months on. But for a lot of these little fire portraits that I'm doing, I knock them out in one punch if I can. I love the wet on wet because once I'm sliding that brush across, it'll pick up a little bit of the undercolor and kind of pull it along with it, and it just helps the blend, and it just creates a lot of beautiful movement with the impasto. And yeah, it's fun. It's kind of a challenge too to make sure that you can lay it on pretty thick and keep it there and not just smudge everything off, which it's fun.
I was going to ask because, that's something that, again, I'm not, rah at the Academy. I do work for them. They do write my checks. But having gone to art school and studied painting, there is that concept of the oil painting. For you, what was it like actually sitting down and painting in oils? Was it your first time doing that when you came to the Academy, or had you had experience with that before?
Completely awful. It looked for the first, I think I had Ann Nelson's class, still life class. That was my first one. She's great. She was so awesome through that. I think the first half of the semester, it basically looked like a 5-year-old was painting. And then one day, and she said this too, like she said, it'll just kind of click one day. And I was like, a few weeks in, I was like, I don't think it's going to click anytime soon. And then it did. It just happened to click on. And I was like, okay, I think I get this. And I'm so naturally heavy-handed, so I've had to really teach myself to not just like wreck the painting by piling on paint. And which is like doing that impasto work. It takes a lighter hand to kind of get that paint to just gently grab on and make a stroke. But yeah, so it was pretty terrible. Like, I don't have any more of those. If they are around, it's probably my mom or my grandmother has kept them, and which I refused to give them away, but they still took them. They're like, they're great. And I'm like, no, they're not.
No, they're not.
They're truly
Those
not.
should be underpaintings at best.
Yeah.
Those should have been gessoed or in the garage somewhere as coasters.
Yes, yeah.
Oil just scares me. The school I went to, we didn't have the facilities to do oil because of all of the hazmat stuff. So we were only doing acrylic. And then anytime I see somebody who does oil, it's like, oh, you're the real one. You're a real artist. It's like, oh man, and I mean that with absolutely no disrespect to all the wonderful artists out there who are working in other mediums. But when you see somebody, and especially like your work and some of the portraiture work that's done in oils, it's like, oh man, that's like work. This is a lot of work.
It's so funny you say that too, because if I touch acrylic or watercolor, I'm like, what the heck is this? I don't even know what to do with it right now. And then I have to really like back up a little bit and rethink it, and like, okay, you got to work a little more mindfully and slowly, and not so instinctively as you've taught yourself with oil. Like, I really have to slow down and think about it.
Oh wow, okay, yeah. Watercolor is that weird one where it's just like, I'm done. I spent 30 seconds on this, and I have to walk away.
It's one beautiful thing about oil too is it can be very forgiving, and I will a lot of times be like, I don't like that. I'll just scrape it off, and you can't do that with watercolor. Which
on the days you paint and the days that you're creating, kind of walk me through the process. Walk me through your day of painting. When you sit down and take that long, deep breath and stare at that canvas going, all right, here we go. Walk me through the process of getting your vision out onto the canvas.
All right, so with the newer paintings, I might have like a color scheme and idea or something that might be charging it. I did one recently that I just saw a beautiful sunset, and I loved all the pink and orange and lavender and purple that were hitting the clouds, these huge like thunderheads, and I thought, I kind of want to do that, and I wanted to do another flame portrait, and I was like, well, I'm just going to throw it in the back, and it's just going to be kind of loose, and just a study of it, and I'll kind of start from there. And so that's that technical thing of like, that's still there, but I'm also wanting to express the general like mental health aspect of it. But I will kind of first fish around a lot of like, okay, I've got a ton of reference photos that I've taken over the years, and I will kind of work my way through those and see what strikes my interest. And there's some that I'll have, they're like 6 years old, and I won't even look at them for a while, and I'll just come across them and be like, oh, that's a pretty good one. That kind of fits with what I'm going with. And then I'll paint it. I did one just the other, or I guess last week, that was, I think it was about 4 years old. And just one of myself that I had, and I thought, well, that's a pretty good lighting and setup, and the head posture and everything worked well with kind of what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, so I start there, and I kind of hunt for the photo, and then I will go in and I start structurally. I really draw out my portrait and work slowly to kind of build the framework. And I will do basically almost a grisaille in some ways, and with like burnt umber. So it's not technically grisaille, but I do
A very light underpainting.
very light underpainting, yeah. But I will build the entire head and kind of get all the shadows and lights, like a two-value statement, basically. And then I'll just destroy it with fire, and I will kind of knock all of it away. And that's such an organic process. I will loosely draw out a flame, and 9 times out of 10, I don't actually follow what I loosely drew out. And as I put paint on, I start piling it on. I'm like, no, that doesn't look good. It needs to blow this way, or it needs to go more up or down, or plus swirl. So it's such an organic process. I think that's where the cathartic part of it comes from. It is a molding, and it's really like pushing stuff around, that I'm not letting myself get too attached to anything. I'm letting loose. I'm opening up, which I feel like also ties into the mental health aspect. I'm letting myself open up a little bit more to share this, to share the theme of the work, to share, how the process works, and to let myself work in a way that is very fluid, I guess.
When people are looking at your work, what is it you're hoping they're taking away from it?
Any kind of reaction, actually, I think is pretty good. Yeah, I think as long as it catches your eye, then that's a win for me. And if that does it, then that's great. And hopefully you might, go in a little bit more and kind of see where I'm going with it, or maybe it resonates in some personal way for you whenever you see it. Or if you just like the way I painted it, that would be awesome too. I mean, I really want the message of mental health to get through, but I also want people to just enjoy it. Or if they don't enjoy it, I also want to get a reaction out of that too. Any reaction's a good reaction, I feel like.
So that was going to be my question, is what do you like most about being an artist then? Is it the reaction, or is it a message?
Oh, probably the message, and also the process. Those two things are probably the most important for me. And it took a while for me to get to the point of it being the message. I think I just wanted to paint pretty pictures for a while, and I thought that's what I wanted to do anyway. And now I realize that, having a little more meaning into it is important for me. So getting that across is probably the main thing.
And you're doing a lot of figurative work, which is the hardest, I think, for people to deal with, because it's recognizable. Like you said pretty pictures. We've all done the flowers and the still lives, and there's some amazing still lives out there. There's some great pieces, and you can have a lot to say with still lives. And landscapes, I guess, I'm not a nature person, so they don't do much for me personally, but you're drawing a human face that's recognizable. And that's tough. That alone, forget what you're doing, drawing a face is tough. What were some of the things that you're looking for and some of the training you really honed in on to help you bring about emotion from a human face?
Mainly the eyes. There's just so much that our eyes can say. I mean, you can say a lot in just a very simple, straightforward portrait if you've captured an expression in someone's eyes. And that's always been important to me. I think once I first got into drawing portraits, realistic and not like a comic book kind of thing, I couldn't do it very well. So I didn't like that. And I just obsessively worked on it and really tried to build that skill to be able to do it, because it was so hard. And you could easily recognize if somebody, if you knew the person, that their face is off. And I'm just I don't like that. I want it to look like who it is, and you to be able to say, oh, that's so-and-so. And to be able to capture that was so super important. And then I got to really noticing how strong our eyes could tell a story. So I just really started trying to put a lot of focus on that. Even with the strong lighting, I would always try to put a pop of a highlight in there, or something that where people could see it and maybe hopefully resonate with it in some way.
Yeah, because that is an aggressive choice you're doing. You're putting the light source almost in a photographic way, especially when you've got a piece where someone's wearing glasses. That's one of your self-portraits, I'm guessing. And a lot of artists who are not taking a photograph would remove that eye highlight, remove that secondary eye light in the glasses. I can take the reflection out now. It's not a thing. And you're putting that in there in a very aggressive, kind of in-your-face way. It's pretty rough, man.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want it to be a little, aggressive is a good way to, I want your eye to go right to it. So if there's a strong contrast or if it looks a little more intense, then that'll pull it there. So, yeah.
Talk to me about some of those choices, because that's another good image that I'm going to link to in the show notes, because your piece, it's cataclysm, correct?
Yes.
When we're talking about figurative work, because modern art, contemporary art, art that people are making right now, whatever you want to call that, now we have branding. Now we have, you're drawing people and they're wearing clothes, and branding and graphic design and a Nike swoosh, or in this case, the Sub Pop logo on the hat.
Yeah.
There's a lot that you're leaving in or intentionally putting in, I'm guessing. Is there reasons behind some of that, or it was just fit the moment?
It's a little of this, a little of that. Some of it's like, well, I like the way it looks. I like the way the Sub Pop contrast was in there, and I felt like it helped pull a little more, pull your eye around to that particular portrait. That's a hat where religiously all the time. It's getting pretty gross too, because I'll wear it outside to go on like a hot walk with our dogs or something like that. So it's during retirement. That's such a something I loved, and I listened to a lot of bands on Sub Pop growing up. So it was
almost like a talisman, almost.
It is totally, yeah. So it was just it's one of my favorite things, and I thought, well, I'm doing a self-portrait with this, so I'm just gonna put what is meaningful to me in there too. I'm not gonna wipe it off and just have it be a plain hat. That's a part of me, so.
No, it's just an interesting choice, because we see so much of this modern and contemporary art where it's like, well, now, before, people are always wearing clothes. So you mentioned Caravaggio, and you look at any master, it's like, oh, I'm drawing the clothes. I like the way the fabric folds, and there's that. I'm showing my technical skill by drawing the folds of this object. No one would have this. It's there for me to impress you or to show off my skill. And, you've got a black shirt and a black hat, but that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Just avoid is, equally aggressive.
Yeah. It was like, how do I make it? I don't want it to be overpowering, because there's so many expressions and so much movement happening in that one that I wanted to achieve. I thought, okay, I want more simple color and value around all of that, and have most of the value be in the faces, like they're pulling them out, making them pop a lot stronger. So just, a rich red and a deep black with little highlights in it, just to kind of indicate some folds and stuff. But even being a t-shirt, it's not going to have that many folds to paint. So. Mm-hmm.
We're talking a lot about your work, and you're doing a lot of figurative pieces. You're doing, aside from the fire, there are human elements into this. So this is people. Have you thought about what the next series or what some of the next things are going to be? Are you going to stick to the figurative world or play around a little bit?
Probably kind of stick with what I'm doing in the figurative world and play around a little bit too. What I've done with the fire and with those abstracted realistic pieces, that's likely going to be where I'm headed down for a while. They feel important for me to create, because they're in that vein of reflecting on mental health, and they are also fun to paint, and they're not just the typical portrait. It was time for me to kind of get out of the typical portrait or figure or commission or anything like that, and just kind of paint something a little more out there.
Here's the big question for you then, because you're actually of the age where it's acceptable to ask this question. You're not an old guy like me, but you've had some life experiences. Looking back, now that you've found art, what would you say to that younger artist, or you as a younger artist, or even you before, when you were just doodling away? What would you say to yourself?
Don't dismiss it. Just keep listening to what feels good with it. And it's nice to just doodle around and just keep doodling and see where it goes. Just have fun and listen to what you want to do with it. Don't force yourself to do anything. That's important.
That's tough. That's the wrong answer. We're supposed to be just doing what we're supposed to be doing, man.
I think it's a personal response. It's me talking to myself a little bit. Yeah.
The absolute most important question I do have to ask is, where can we find all your work? How's a good way to get in touch with you?
Instagram's good at Rodney Thompson Art, or my website, which is also rodneythompsonart.com. Those are probably the two best places to find me. I've got Facebook as well, but Instagram gets the most traffic.
Okay. And then we also have, of course, they can go see your work on the Spring Show website as well.
Yes.
Which is super important, and just kind of see, where everybody's coming from. Give me the good parting line, because I can't think of a really intelligent way to get you to give me a good parting line. But give me something like how the 18-year-old that's coming in here who wants to go to school, not you, the new 18-year-old who's like, okay, I want to be an artist, but damn, nobody else gets it.
Listen to yourself and work your ass off, but don't burn yourself out. Find a balance at that. That's the trick. I'm still trying to figure that out. But yeah, as long as you're listening to your heart and what you want to create, I think you can get a lot out of that, and then just work hard at it.
So there you have it, a peek behind the curtain, if you will, into the feelings, thoughts, and emotions that go into the art we create. And right now, a lot of us have been inside for quite a long time and, are thinking about things and maybe overthinking things. If you're not feeling great, reach out to a friend, a family member, and just say, hey, let's sit down, talk. And feel free to share your emotions with your friends, family, and loved ones, just to kind of help get through this time we're living in. I'm Bobby Brill. This has been Creative Mind. Thanks for listening.